There have been some amazing dishes on MasterChef, but these chef fails, particularly the very first one, are the most humiliating of all time. Yes, I'm talking about the king of kitchen disasters, Tali Clavijo. I mean, this dude had a talent like no other. He could turn classic dishes into, well, let's just call whatever he turned them into unrecognizable and leave it at that. Just like what happened in episode 4 of season 3. You see, Felix had the advantage of choosing the style of food for everyone else to cook after winning the mystery box challenge. The judges presented their most intimidating dishes, from which Felix would have to pick one for the rest of the contestants. While Joe obviously came up with Italian risotto, Graham presented a classic New England clam chowder, and Chef Ramsay, well, any guesses? Of course, it had to be beef Wellington. And what was Felix's pick, you ask? Well, check this out.
A stunning risotto.
Now, you might initially think that you went for the wrong dish. But if you've seen like 15 minutes of Hell's Kitchen, you can probably guess where this is going. Fortunately for Felix, she didn't have to cook for the round, but the remaining contestants had 45 minutes to beat the elimination challenge. While none of the contestants wanted to go home over something like a risotto, Tali came up with something that had the judges questioning where his head was even at.
I think Tali is kind of really out of his comfort zone. His technique is all...
Yeah, definitely way out of his comfort zone. Which is why he should have chosen to play it safe instead of experimenting like that.
I mean, there's certain things that never go in a bloody risotto. Cranberry's one of them.
He doesn't know when to stop.
Forget about the technique, Chef Ramsay had a problem even with the ingredients he went for. And believe me, there had been some serious doubts about how it was going to turn out in the end.
I'm seriously concerned. He is in hot water.
Once the time ran out, it was time for the judges to taste each dish and determine the bottom 3. And here comes our hero with his version of risotto.
Joe is definitely the scariest judge. He's the judge to win over.
Yup, Tali believed that Joe was the key to the MasterChef title, but would the tough man be impressed by his dish? Let's check it out.
I made a pistachio, cranberry, cherry, and gooseberry risotto.
It sounded like an interesting combination of flavors, but not one that Joe looked ready to accept.
You know what it is? It's garbage is what it is. What you did on that dish is inappropriate.
It's safe to say that he found it pretty off-putting and completely destroyed Tali over it.
And ultimately kind of disgusting.
Given Joe's description of the dish, I thought this would be Tali's last time cooking in the MasterChef kitchen, right? As for Chef Ramsay, his reaction was even worse. If that doesn't speak volumes, I don't know what will. The famous chef simply couldn't let go of how bizarre the whole combination of cranberries and gooseberries were for a risotto of all things.
The nuts, the gooseberries, already just unheard of in a risotto. That is a disaster.
Yeah, for me, they'd be better off in oatmeal. Anyway, after the underwhelming performance, it wasn't surprising to see Tali in the bottom 3 alongside Dave Mack and Helen. Jot this down because it's going to be a hell of a time moving forward. After Helen was saved, the ultimate decision came down to the two who remained, Tali and Dave. Ramsay made it abundantly clear as to why Tali found himself so close to getting cut.
Tali, you're not safe either.
Chef Ramsay schooled him for trying to fool the judges with the odd combination of ingredients, but Tali was quick to defend himself.
Sorry, chef, this is my first time cooking a risotto.
Despite all that, the judges decided to eliminate Dave for some reason. Most everyone in the room was taken aback by the decision, but Chef Ramsay asked him to head back to his station with a little warning.
You have dodged that bullet. I'm telling you, you are flying by the seat of your pants. Back on your station.
However, instead of being grateful and working on polishing his skills, during his time on the show, Tali gained a reputation for conspiring with another contestant. Yep, I'm talking about Ryan. In an attempt to make themselves look good, they ended up targeting Monty for no apparent reason. So what happened is, in episode 6, Ryan won the mystery box challenge. And as a result, he received some advantages for the elimination challenge.
The theme of today's elimination is fresh versus convenience.
The theme of the challenge was fresh versus convenience food, and the chosen ingredients were ahi tuna, ham, and crabs. Since Ryan had to pick the main ingredient, guess what he went with?
The most amazing. Crab.
Additionally, he had the power to determine which contestants would cook fresh crab and which ones would work with canned crab. And what did he choose for Tali?
I've been Tali the fresh crab.
Interesting.
Ryan did everything in his power to ensure that Tali didn't go home.
I can't afford to have Tali go home.
And handing him the fresh crab was a huge part of his strategy. Anyway, cut to the challenge, and each contestant had 60 minutes to scrape together something with their canned crab or make something actually nice with their fresh crab. and Tally was pleased as punch with his and Ryan's little plot.
Ryan totally hooks me up. He gives me the biggest, freshest crab on the table.
Meanwhile, Monty, who landed canned crab, saw things for what they were.
I hope Ryan gets crabs.
But sadly for this contestant here, it became a daunting task to handle a live crab.
So it's just moving around?
Yeah, it's just moving around live.
Can I beat it with my cane?
Yeah, Ryan clearly wanted Christine out of the competition. I mean, why else would he hand the blind person a live crab, right? Christine, who was clearly struggling with it, even got injured along the way. But look at Ryan, will ya?
It pierced me.
That cunning smile. Not cool, man. Not cool. Anyway, as time went on, the judges started to discuss the contestants' progress.
He doesn't know if it's a bait crab.
Lack of vision, lack of clarity.
It's like an ADD.
Tally and Helen had nothing even resembling proper direction in their dishes. But Tally thought he was nailing it. After all, his dear buddy had given him the pick of the litter.
Ryan gave me the live crab. He knows that live crab is definitely much better than the canned stuff.
Anyway, when it was time for the tasting, Tally presented his dish, being paprika buttered crab with saffron and watercress sauce. And the judges' reactions were insane.
Jeez, looks like a horror movie.
Horror indeed. I mean, there couldn't have been a better description than that. Just look at it. Tally actually took the best crab and butchered it beyond recognition. After the shock set in, Graham couldn't figure out how, or rather what, he was supposed to taste.
You're not seeing the art behind the plate here.
All he could see were the crab legs sticking out of the plate in an eerie arrangement fit for an insane person. As for the crab meat, it was completely missing.
Where's the whole, all the
I put it
the
into
back fin crab meat in the middle?
When Joe quizzed Tally about it, guess what he said?
I put it in the sauce.
A perfectly good crab, fresh crab, and a pretty expensive one at that, was reduced to nothing but sauce. Tally couldn't have been more disrespectful. To the judges or the crab.
Based on that performance, I'd start packing my knives if I was you.
Ryan's plan backfired horribly as Tally, his ride or die guy, stood a serious chance of going home. Despite the negative feedback, Tally remained confident in his abilities.
My stuff is so good that they can't even see the potential.
Talk about delusion. Anyway, once again, Tally found himself in the bottom 3. Remember how I said this was going to be a running theme? And by the way, Christine, who was actually faced with a real challenge, managed to impress the judges.
Are you really blind?
Yes, chef, I am.
It wasn't just delicious, but it also looks stunning too. That takes some real skill considering the person who plated it literally couldn't see. But between her and Tally, only one of them looked like it was thrown together blindfolded. Ryan tried his very best to throw Christine out of the competition, and Chef Ramsay knew he'd play dirty. To teach him a really good lesson, guess what Ramsay did? He asked Ryan to step forward and taste Christine's amazing ceviche cocktail. Yeah, he literally made him eat his words. Speaking of, the other contestant Ryan had a bit of an issue with was Monty, and she decided to push the boundaries by making a Scotch egg with a crab shell. And guess what? It turned out to be yet another complete success.
It's delicious.
I mean, the famous chef couldn't stop singing the praises of her dish.
There are chefs in this town that would love to have that on their menu tonight. It's bloody delicious.
Joe also appreciated Monty's dish.
Great idea.
Thank you.
I really like it a lot.
Thank you.
Well, Ryan's strategy had fallen flat on its face. As always, Tally found himself in the bottom 2, this time alongside Helen. But as luck would have it, Tally dodged a bullet once again. It's times like this that make me wonder if the show is rigged. Like, how could the judges not see through his pitiful excuse for talent, right? See, I know Helen didn't deserve to stay at all, but I believe neither did Tally. Like, come on. It's not like we've never seen double eliminations on the show, and this episode totally deserved it. However, Tally would go on to stay on the show for a long time to come. But did he use that time to better himself? Of course not! In episode 7, Ryan and Tally teamed up once again against Monty for, again, no apparent reason. But maybe the group challenge they lost against her had some role to play in it. Either way, the two of them found themselves facing the pressure test. But instead of just admitting defeat, they started to badmouth Monty instead.
We want Monty to go home. Some girls have like one screw loose. I feel like she has like 30 different screws loose.
Why, just why? I have no idea why these two guys hated her at all. In fact, they even shared that Monty should have been the one in the pressure test instead of them. See, the problem here was that Tally had a very inflated ego, if you haven't figured that out already. As for Ryan, he wasn't much better.
Ding dong, the witch is dead with a capital P.
Anyway, fast forward to the pressure test, and things didn't go very well for Ryan. He was the first one to present his dish, but unfortunately, the cake he baked collapsed, and Graham shot back with a pretty nasty comment.
I'm not a scientist in baking in the kitchen.
Anyway, let's see what his partner in crime, Tally, had to present.
Oh.
Tally faced some similar difficulties with his cake and ended up having some liquid in the center. Wait, did I say some? Well, I take that back. Because here is what it really looked like. The judges didn't really have much to say about Tally's dish. And when they were done with the deliberations, Tally and Ryan found themselves in the bottom two facing off against each other. Now this threw viewers into a hot debate. While some wanted Tally to leave due to his gross lack of skill, some others wanted Ryan out for trying to game the system. But hey, at least the dude won a mystery box challenge, right? Anyway, the final decision was in the judges' hands, and here I was praying for a double elimination for the second time this season. I mean, it would be perfect, right? The two best friends who worked together to sabotage everyone else got thrown out of the competition together. Couldn't get any more poetic than that. However, the famous chef had other plans. He first threw an unexpected twist by asking them a rather thought-provoking question.
I'm gonna ask that individual who knows who he is
Oh no, that wasn't the end of it. There was more to come.
that didn't produce a stunning molten lava cake to act on integrity.
Honestly, when have you ever seen something like this on MasterChef before? This is even crazier than a double elimination. The contestants had to step up all by themselves and hand over their aprons and their dreams at the very same time. But who do you think had enough integrity to step up?
Tally, upstairs.
Tally didn't move a muscle as Ryan decided to take off his apron and walk to the judges. Essentially, he volunteered to leave the competition, and Tally, despite being in the bottom two for 3 consecutive weeks, found himself safe thanks to his buddy's sacrifice. Ryan decided to give it all up for his friend, but if I go ahead and replay that moment for you one more time, you'll quickly notice how Tally didn't flinch one bit as the judges waited for the contestants to make a decision. It was a silent message to Ryan to pack up and leave for his sake. The dude didn't even spare his own friend. Either way, from there on out, Tally had a challenging time in the kitchen due to his consistent poor performances or a dream team to fall back on. Despite his ambition to be creative and use complex techniques, he lacked the necessary knowledge and often failed in his attempts. In one particular instance, Tally's station was in complete disarray, with kitchen equipment scattered on the floor. Chef Ramsay, who happened to notice this, was floored, no pun intended.
Look at the mess.
And what was his excuse?
Put it all in one space.
It's not in one space, it's from there all the way down and all over the place.
Yeah, safe to say that wasn't gonna cut it.
If you were in any of our kitchens,
Yes, chef.
you'd been fired 6 months ago.
Not gonna lie, I thought Tally would get kicked out right then and there. And then, suddenly I remembered this wasn't Hell's Kitchen. Anyway, despite the chaotic scene, Tally presented a 3-cheese pizza with duck breast and creme fraiche sauce. And what do you think that went like?
It's served on a bed of raw flour, right?
My intention was to roll out my flatbread and get it into the oven.
Yeah, just like you thought, it was a waste of everyone's time yet again. Ryan definitely stood a better chance in the competition than this poor excuse for a cook. Just look at all that raw flour. Ugh. I can't believe the judges actually dug in to taste that damn thing.
Yep.
Of course, the judges decided to come out swinging with some heavy criticism, especially Chef Ramsay.
You work in a mess, produce a mess. I'm struggling to identify what the hell you're doing.
Ultimately, Tally's downfall came from his delusions, thanks to which he struggled to recognize his flaws. He continued to brag about his apparently hidden skills, which I believe are gonna stay on the down low forever, given that they didn't exist and all. See, it's essential for aspiring chefs to have a realistic understanding of their abilities and to be receptive to constructive criticism. They need to improve to succeed in a competitive environment like MasterChef. But Tally's attitude ultimately led to his elimination, which was a long time coming, by the way. Yep, episode 11 finally spelled doom for Tally. That's 11 episodes too long for me, but better late than never, right? So, in this final challenge, Tally received Arctic char as his protein. Now, Tally decided to use a sous vide approach to cook his fish. But the famous chef wasn't so sure about that.
It's an oily fish.
Yeah.
Why would you sous vide that?
But Tally, as usual, assumed that he knew it all.
It cooks it in its own juices and it keeps that flavor locked in.
What the hell? You think you know better? During the tasting, it became clear that Tally's Arctic char with green lentils didn't meet the judges' expectations. And this time, Joe wasn't mincing words.
Broiled lentils, because I can see they're all exploded and overcooked.
He then also called him out for using big words to describe his dish instead of just being straight up with a presentation. As for Ramsay, he was even more critical with his feedback.
Watch you cook and I just get so pissed off with you around. You're misinterpreting the competition.
And then, just when you thought he was done, he dropped the mother of all bombs.
It's MasterChef, not Master Bait.
Oh, that was brutal. And guess what? It just kept coming.
It's badly seasoned. It's just a mess.
It was almost like the judges got up and chose violence against Tally for the day. Eventually, none of the judges had anything positive to say about the dish. And this time, Tally found himself in the bottom 3 alongside David and Christine. And then came the ultimate elimination that everyone was hoping for all along.
Tally, your time is done in MasterChef.
Tally was finally shown the door for his poor performance. Correction, let me reword that for you. He was eliminated for his poor performance, which consistently became poorer and poorer every single episode. Suddenly, all is right in the world. It's clear that Tally had been struggling in the kitchen for some time now, and his elimination was ultimately for the best. Throughout the competition, Tally's lack of skill and unbearable persona became all too apparent. It was almost like a train wreck that you just couldn't look away from, right? The judges, and all of us alike, were left scratching our heads at how someone could be so clueless in the kitchen and yet so full of themselves. Despite several chances to turn things around, Tally just couldn't get his act together. But hey, let's not be too harsh here. Even though Tally was a total disaster as a home cook, his presence on the show taught us an important lesson. Not every home cook deserves to be a chef, let alone a MasterChef winner. Lesson number 2, being cocky and stubborn won't get you very far in any walk of life, but especially not in the kitchen. Anyway, so what's Tally been up to after the show? Maybe he's got a not-so-secret bromance with Ryan going on? Now, you might all know that Tally was a musician from Chicago before joining MasterChef. Despite being eliminated, he didn't let that discourage him from continuing to cook, although not professionally. In his professional career, Tally had experience as a recruiter for tech startup companies. He worked as a recruiter for WAG Labs Incorporated, a tech startup company, before joining Lucky Day as the head of talent. Currently speaking, Tally is working as a recruiter at Edify. Maybe he finally found it in him to step back and reevaluate his approach, and maybe even come back stronger and wiser in the future. Who knows, cause stranger things have happened, right? Watch as this chef ruined her standing during this round.
The theme is Chinese.
Having won the previous Mystery Box Challenge, Whitney had the choice to pick the star ingredient, and she went with mandarin oranges. Now, every contestant was tasked with skillfully incorporating the citrus delight into Chinese cuisine creations. While most contestants were pumped up, Avis was sweating bullets.
The problem is, I don't know how to make the perfect Chinese dish.
Well, it looks like things just got 10 times tougher for her. And guess what? When Chef Ramsay stopped by for a quick update, Avis was all over the place.
This is my carrots. I'm going to go ahead on and just, cook my
boiled carrots.
See what I mean? Apparently, she was gonna use carrots, but Chef Ramsay wasn't in on her plan.
Looks like she's panicking, and it shows in terms of what she's putting together. Yes. Big trouble in Little China.
Anyway, cut to the tasting, and Avis presented her Chinese orange chicken with vegetables and noodles. And right off the bat, Chef Ramsay wasn't impressed.
Is that a dish to be proud of in the 21st century?
Clearly, the dish looked like a disaster, but Avis thought otherwise.
Yes, it is.
And when it was time for the tasting, well, maybe everyone would have been better off if they just judged the book by its cover.
It looks like a sort of little chicken noodle vegetable dinner from a gas station.
Damn, that was brutal. But nope, he didn't stop there.
I don't see the authenticity of a unique Chinese delicious dish.
Avis's heart sank as reality hit her like a ton of bricks. Eventually, she ended up being one of the very first contestants to be eliminated from the MasterChef kitchen. But before she left, the judges urged her to keep cooking and honing her skills.
Avis, you've got such heart and soul that you put into your food, which is inherent in cooking.
Well, of course, Avis would be the only one with the unique honor of being the first to go, but she was far from the last. Now, heading over to Season 2, and this contestant here, if you thought Avis was bad, well, let me say that we're just getting started.
I want to run over to Adrian and just give him a big hug right now.
Yup, I'm talking about none other than Alvin, known for his vast culinary knowledge alongside a technical arsenal used for molecular gastronomy.
I'm hoping that carries me through today.
However, despite all that, he failed to execute, well, anything properly. And it really caught up with him in Episode 7's elimination test.
Theme for today's elimination test is desserts.
And what was the main ingredient of the theme, you ask? Check this out.
coffee.
And so the test began. The contestants were given 1 hour and 30 minutes to make an exquisite dessert. Now Alvin was feeling really confident about the challenge. But when Joe and Graham reached the station, they were pretty taken aback by his ideas.
I'm trying to pull off coffee spheres to put in the beignet.
So like a liquid center,
yeah,
Cafe
liquid
du
center,
Monde.
yeah.
Our guy here was putting his molecular gastronomy to the test, that's for sure. But Joe reminded him not to get lost in the weeds, no matter how scientific those weeds were.
Are you out of your mind? Make us dessert. It's not a chemistry experiment.
You need to convert him.
And finally, when it was time to present his dish, well...
Mixed with sodium alginate, so set to cool, and that's dropped into a calcium chloride bath.
Now, I'm not a fan of what it looks like, and I'm sure I'm far from the only one with that opinion. But guess what it tasted like?
It's extraordinarily bitter.
As if that wasn't enough, Chef Ramsay then came up with a rather unsettling description.
There's like a coffee blood clot.
Yikes, not sure where Chef Ramsay got that idea from. But leave it to Graham, and he decided to keep things real.
Things like this give what I personally do day in and day out a bad name.
Now, there's a reason why molecular gastronomy is popular in the fanciest restaurants the world over. If you can nail it, it's gonna be a hit, but if you can't, well, you'll be like Alvin over here. Like Chef Ramsay's parting words for Alvin, had he understood the basics before getting into the more complicated stuff, who knows, maybe he could have gone further into the competition. But well, there's no coming back from some mistakes, just like what happened with this next contestant from season 3. See, there are those who deserve to be a part of the show, and then there are those who absolutely don't. And Tally is the poster child for the latter.
Oh man.
If you ask me, I think Tally should have never made it onto the show in the first place. The fact that he found himself in the bottom 3 more times than not should be a reason enough to believe that his culinary skills weren't up to par, right?
They can't see the beauty and the genius that is my food.
And if that wasn't enough, don't even get me started on his attitude.
I'm gonna have to throw someone under the bus.
So it happened during a Say It With Me Now elimination test, and the theme of the night was everything fish.
Because it's time to go fishing.
Now, the winner of the Mystery Box Challenge, being Felix, got to hand select each and every fish that her competitors would be cooking. And she got to choose from a wide range of fish, being rockfish, John Dory, catfish, yellowtail, salmon, and Arctic char. So, eventually, she settled with Arctic char for Tally. It's probably one of the easiest fish if you know what to do with it. But this guy did not, and that's for sure. During the rounds when Chef Ramsay reached Tally's table, he was already questioning Tally's poor choices.
Fish.
Sous vide it.
Yeah. And I'm going to finish it on the skillet.
It's an oily fish.
Apparently, Tally thought the fish would cook in its own juices, but, well, maybe he should have studied the science with our old pal Alvin, huh? Regardless, Chef Ramsay wished him luck and moved on. God knows he needed it. Soon enough, the judges were discussing each contestant's dishes, and it seemed like Tally was the top of their concerns.
Arctic char is certainly the easiest fish here today.
Yeah.
You could steam it, grill it, saute it.
And no, that wasn't the only issue. Now, listen to this.
Serving green lentils with it, bacon, mustard.
All those flavors are gonna obliterate it.
What's more, Graham chimed in with his own set of complaints.
I mean, that's stuff that you would serve with like a nice roasted piece of meat.
Sometime later, when the judges urged the contestants to taste their own dishes before calling it a day, Tally realized that things weren't exactly going his way.
Now, you rub the Arctic char and Dijon mustard.
It was time for Plan B, which was a rather risky move. But Tally went with it anyway.
Beautiful sous vide filet on the skillet. I might just serve it like this.
You can serve it like that now?
Yeah.
Chef Ramsay, however, wasn't happy with his little plan as the fish was stone cold. However, Tally reassured him that he could fix it. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. Now, guess what Tally had to say about the whole ordeal.
It's frustrating when Chef Ramsay interrupts me in the middle of my creative genius explosion.
Wait for it.
It's kind of like interrupting a master artist like Picasso.
And there it is. Now, you must be wondering what the final tasting was like. Look, I don't want to spoil this for you, so you better check it out for yourselves.
Kind of produce a...
And when Joe interrupts you like that, believe me, it's not a good sign.
You think you're going to impress us with things like sous vide, emulsify?
Calling his dish a mess would be an insult to messes all over the world, right?
So at the end of the day, what you have here is basically destroyed lentils.
All you could see was a bunch of herbs with no seasoning and a piece of fatty bacon on top of poorly cooked Arctic char. Simply put, it looked really sad.
You've consistently disappointed us.
And Chef Ramsay didn't hold back either.
And I watch you cook and I just get so pissed off with you around.
But just you wait till you hear what he had to say next.
It's MasterChef, not Master Bait.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of that iconic line from Chef Ramsay before, but did Tally own up to his mistake? Not really.
Maybe they're just a little too old school, and they can't see the beauty and the genius that is my food.
Well, there was only one way to humble him, and that was to show him the damn door. But let's keep things moving, shall we? You see, Sasha from season 4 was all about confidence.
You sure you want to put cheese on it?
It's gonna work out, trust me, Doc.
But hey, confidence can only take you so far, right? Because once the heat of the competition cranked up, she got booted out just like that. Hailing from Alabama, Sasha has gone down as the first contestant to place 19th in the history of the competition. Now, let me remind you, it wasn't anything to be proud of. The whole Langoustine episode? Sasha's confidence took a nosedive as soon as her dish was presented to the judges.
It looks like someone's pooped on the plate.
But guess what? She held her head high. She wasn't about to bow down to some criticism from a bunch of glorified judges. Oh no, Sasha was sure of her skills. But the judges, not so much.
It doesn't taste nice at all. The combination's just all wrong.
One after the other, Sasha faced every ounce of negative feedback like it wasn't even about her dish.
What's it worth now?
With the grits, I'll say 55.
Anyway, considering her dish made it safely into the trash, her elimination wasn't much of a surprise. By the way, did you know that Sasha kicked off with Chrissy and Kathy almost as soon as they met?
Bacon!
Now, imagine if she stayed in the competition for longer. I can't imagine the kind of drama they would have collectively brought to the table.
Let her have her moment, because I don't think it's gonna last very long.
Either way, with Sasha's elimination, the judges made it a point to send a message across all the contestants. In the MasterChef kitchen, it isn't sass, but skill that counts, and Sasha had none. Now, moving on, my pick from season 5 is obviously Francis.
And Christian and I both know it. We look at each other, we're like, this is not what we should have put out there. And
so, if you caught up to season 5 of MasterChef, you know that Francis was a pretty solid chef who had a pretty great vibe with everyone. But when it came to teamwork or replicating dishes, he was kinda lacking big time. That is exactly what went down in episode 7's Spring Rolls Pressure Test.
Spring rolls. Served with a delicious dipping sauce.
So during the tasting, Francis presented his spring rolls, but it failed to make an impression.
The ratio of filling is obviously way out of proportion.
There was so much oil that Joe even pressed a piece under the napkin to show how the cold oil penetrated the wrapper.
These are really greasy.
But just you wait for the final blow.
Well, if you go home tonight, you could order in some spring rolls.
Out of all the mistakes he could have made, it had to be grease. Eventually, Francis found himself in a really sticky situation that he could never recover from. Yup, it turned out to be his very last day on the show. Now, coming to season 6, and this contestant made more enemies than friends in the competition. You see, Shelly was a fighter.
I'm a single mom, and I got a 9-year-old who's my everything. She's my biggest cheerleader.
Given her rough background, her determination and passion to make a name on MasterChef shone through as she put immense hard work into the competition.
I'm just happy that I believed enough to get here.
But gradually, things started to go downhill. From shying away from responsibility to randomly throwing teammates under the bus, Shelly's journey had a massive fall from grace. With time, she started to lose her footing and her cooking got more and more inconsistent. But if I have to pick her worst performance, it would be this dish right here.
Peanut butter and jelly 5-spice spring roll.
And well, what started on a rough note ended in an even bigger mess.
And that looks like a stuffed condom.
Plus, you know what? He is not wrong. With that, let's move on to season 7, when the elimination test in episode 6 came down heavy on one particular contestant. So, the contestants had to prepare a lobster tortellini, and right off the bat, they started having a really hard time.
I don't know what to put my eggs in.
Focus, Lisa Ann.
Things got so bad that Ramsay had to walk over to her station and remind her to get her act together. Now, Ramsay gave her probably some of the best advice he's ever given, but what did she give him in return? That's one way to say thank you, I guess. Either way, her cooking skills didn't make anything better.
4 tortellinis burst. And look, it's got no top on it.
Now, that was just tortellini. Wait till you see what happened with the broth.
It's a little salty.
Things got heated real fast when Chef Ramsay questioned how serious she was about the competition.
You know how hard I worked to get here?
I'm not convinced.
I worked really hard to get here.
MasterChef is all about letting your food do the talking and not your empty promises. However, the famous chef was done with her excuses and she got the boot before she even had the time to process what he'd said. But this next contestant came close in competition when you consider her not so impressive track record on the show.
That fish was spicy.
Yup, that's Paige for you, the self-proclaimed culinary whiz that MasterChef really could have done without. You see, Paige was so full of herself that her one single move tanked an entire team challenge. Yeah, all on her own. As a result, she found herself facing a pressure test where the contestants had to recreate Aaron's grilled pork chop dish. Now, you'd think after the over-seasoning disaster earlier, she'd be humble about this one, right? Well, you don't know Paige.
I'm confident that I can replicate it. I'm half Mexican, so I'm pretty familiar with Mexican flavors.
Right.
Despite her misplaced confidence, Paige's attempt to recreate the dish left a lot to be desired.
Just that stark white fat, unrendered. Definitely. You're almost a little too smiley for me for this pressure test.
Christina found Paige's pork chop to be messy and undercooked, and the sauce, well, listen to this.
Definitely over-reduced, just sloppy, it's messy, it's almost like you just don't care anymore.
Despite her smiley demeanor, Paige couldn't hide from the harsh reality. Her dish was a flop, and her confidence maybe was a tad misplaced like I said. It was clear that she had a lot to learn, and it wasn't just her time to be on the show. Just like this next contestant right here. Hopping over to Season 9, Episode 5, and contestants were faced with the daunting task of recreating Chef Ramsay's Crab Benedict in just 30 minutes. Yeah, recreation challenges have been an Achilles heel for even the best chefs. But for Alushila, well, she certainly wasn't the best chef.
That ain't right. I gotta do another one.
You got it, Lulu.
Up one egg.
Useless eggs are all over the place.
Time was slipping away and she was clearly flustered. But as the clock ran out, Alushila presented her dish to the judges, and Chef Ramsay's reaction said it all.
I already know.
Her presentation was a disaster. She didn't even bother using the utensils that everyone was provided with.
And then I see this. Where is that black plate?
It was very clear that she had missed the mark by a long shot. Despite the well-poached egg and perfectly seasoned crab, Alushila's incomplete plate sealed her fate. But hey, at least she left with her head held high, promising to continue cooking. Unlike this next contestant from Season 10.
I'm feeling like really confident and I'm super excited.
So I did have a hard time picking the worst contestant from Season 10, but then I zeroed in on this one right here.
I've got the deepest knowledge base that's out there. I've traveled the world. I know about a ton of ingredients.
Now that's called overconfidence. And don't even get me started on his attitude too.
I don't need Gordon's step-by-step instructions. I can knock out awesome dishes.
To make matters worse for himself, when he was throwing together his tart, he forgot to save the juices he'd taken out.
What is that? Looking down at the tart, it looks really dry.
Oh no, there was no way they could keep him on the show after this.
Where is the caramel? Look, there's nothing. There's no caramel. This is not a tarte tatin. This is an apple tart.
You know, the less said about him, the better. Speaking of saying less, this next pick from Season 11 was real easy.
I'm definitely going to show the judges why it was a good choice keeping me here.
Considering all the failed dishes that she had, Anai was determined to prove herself in the kitchen. But unfortunately, it only got worse. So the contestants were tasked with preparing a restaurant-quality dessert. However, Anai's dessert left much to be desired.
What you have in front of you is an avocado no-bake cheesecake, topped off with a dragon fruit.
Her avocado no-bake cheesecake sounded really intriguing, but the judges were less than impressed.
We still have the base of the actual cheesecake.
The base of the cheesecake still had the mold underneath it, and it wasn't even completely baked. Or like at all, considering, well, the whole no-bake part of it. Now, imagine if the judges had to tell that the cheesecake looked more like a dip than an actual cheesecake.
You cut corners when it came to even grabbing graham crackers.
And the taste? It was even worse.
The base is uncooked. I think you rushed the whole thing.
Now, just like that, Anai's time in the competition came to an end. Good riddance.
It's hard to get away from this execution.
To not bake or cook anything in a baking challenge for me is a disappointment.
Speaking of satisfying eliminations, when this next guy got the boot, it was so cathartic, but he took his damn time leaving. If you ask me, Season 12 had a whole lot of good. Good food, good cooks, good challenges, and then there was Tommy.
I'm afraid of those difficult ones.
After dodging the bullet like a million times leading up to this moment, Tommy finally gave up in this dessert round.
Into the blast chiller instead of the refrigerator. It's as hard as a rock.
I mean, what a mess. The dessert and Tommy, both of them.
Tommy, I can get it back together.
Fast forward to the judgment time, and Tommy's lemon meringue tart was nothing short of a catastrophe. I mean, think about it. That runny mess you're looking at was supposed to be a tart. I bet you wouldn't have been able to figure that out without me telling you. And let's not even get started on the cracked crust and misplaced meringue.
It's totally raw.
Well, Tommy's dish ended up being the worst of the lot. Shocker.
Your meringue is overwhipped, it's watery. I think it's clear. Time was a big issue for you.
While he did make quite the emotional exit, I'm sure that there were many who were glad that he was finally on his way out. And you could count me among them any day of the week. And now, it's finally time for Season 13. Who do you think made it onto the list? Kendall, of course. To me, Kendall always skated by the skin of his teeth thanks to another contestant winning immunity for his region. I guess he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. All the freaking time. However, in episode 10, he unnecessarily complicated things for everyone on his team. So, the challenge was to cook for 100 children. As the team split up, Kendall seemed really confident.
I think Sav is a little worried about the chicken, but I am a barbecue grand champion. I've won a ton of awards.
However, he quickly stumbled on the blue team's grill, much to Chef Ramsay's dismay.
This isn't your wheelhouse. Own it and control it.
Yes.
Can we finish strong, Kendall?
Yes, Chef.
But did he care? Of course not.
Kendall? No answer. Oh my goodness me.
Sorry.
Now the famous chef could see right through his act. He held him accountable for the humiliating loss. He then blamed his overconfidence and lack of communication to be the reason behind his elimination. Yeah, try winning immunity now that you single-handedly tanked your team, bro. And these completely botched dishes were sure to make Ramsay say this. In Season 4, after the red team lost the field challenge, they had to fight to be safe during the pressure test. However, before the contestants revealed what to do, Joe Bastanich explained that only 6 out of the 8 members would take part in the test. But that wasn't the only twist. This time, the judges would pick who would be cooking. On this occasion, contestants Baim Cruz and Jordan Roots were saved. Meanwhile, Luca Monfe, Natasha Kerniak, Christy Basiello, Brie Kozior, Beth Kirby, and Kathy Prieto had to go through the pressure test. And in this episode, during the test, the contestants were given 30 minutes to make some Eggs Benedict. Now, that might sound like a lot of time, but they only had one attempt to make the perfect dish. Who among these chefs do you think would ace this exciting test? Once the test began, each and every one of them faced problems while making it. And by the end of it, only Chrissy and Brie had the best dishes. Luca, Natasha, Beth, and Kathy had the worst ones. And since the judges couldn't pick the worst of the worst, they decided to send all 4 of them to Las Vegas. This was to determine their fate in another set of team and pressure challenges. For the team challenge, the judges paired Luca with Kathy and Beth with Natasha. These pairs were tasked with cooking a stunning burger at Chef Ramsay's burger restaurant. Luca took the lead for the red team, Beth headed the blue team, and Chef Ramsay was the expediter for both of them. The pressure was mounting, and everyone knew that Ramsay hated to see mistakes. The challenge first started off with 60 minutes of prep time. In the red team, Luca suggested using beef as a patty to go with the caramelized onions on top with some added sauce. He thought the cheese wouldn't be necessary, and Kathy, his partner, seemed to agree with whatever he said. She kept nodding all the way and went with his ideas, but in truth, she actually disagreed with him. Meanwhile, in the blue team, Beth came up with an idea of using beef as the patty as well. But she wanted it served with some prosciutto, goat cheese, and some aioli topped with eggs sunny side up. Natasha seemed to hesitate about the eggs, but still went with it. Both Kathy and Natasha were playing their own game. Since they had no say in their dishes, if anything went wrong, they could easily put the blame on their partners Luca and Beth. However, they seemed to forget one crucial point. It was a team challenge, and this meant their decision could backfire. While the prep was going on, both teams struggled to keep up with it. In the blue team, Natasha was having a few problems with the eggs. Beth asked for a better idea, but Natasha wanted to go with Beth's idea as their plan. As both tried to keep up with the eggs, they moved on to dressing the salad. And in the midst of it all, both of them forgot about the dish's main component, the patty. Had Chef Ramsay not reminded them, the blue team had no chance in this competition. And this left Ramsay frustrated. In a stern voice, Chef Ramsay warned them by saying this.
Someone's going home tonight. At this stage, it's one of you.
The doors were close to being thrown open for the service, and there was only 3 minutes until they did. Both teams were hurrying up with their dishes, but Beth and Natasha still had no idea what to do with the eggs. These 2 contestants were letting their ego get in the way of the challenge. And everyone knows that when there's no teamwork, the challenge is bound to fail. At the very last minute, the ladies decided to scrap the eggs and go with goat cheese arugula. Was this a wise decision? Well, we're about to find out. The burgers from both teams were served simultaneously to the customers. Ultimately, they would have to vote on which one was better. Before we move on to the service, let's take a little look at what the blue team would be serving. As for the red team, they would be serving this. Now, as we said, these burgers were sent out at the same time to everyone. If the team said 2 minutes to the window, it had to be 2 minutes. And if Chef Ramsay needed to hold it back, it would only be for a max of 60 seconds. If they failed to turn it in, the team would start losing votes. Once the service began, both teams had 75 minutes to serve. As tickets poured into the kitchen, viewers got a glimpse of Chef Ramsay's serious demeanor that he's always had on Hell's Kitchen. But would he be less hard on everyone since it was MasterChef? Hell no. Anyway, the red team got off to an early start, and Ramsay had to remind the blue team of the rules by saying,
Red team's in the window, blue team, 60 seconds from now.
Chef Ramsay was on fire as usual, and the contestants were struggling to keep up.
I'm like talking to myself here.
Both teams were serving burgers at a good pace, but sometime later, the red team struggled with their orders. Chef Ramsay was getting impatient with the wait and started to count down the 60-second hold.
3, 2, 1.
As the time was about to run out, Luca finally walked up with some burgers. Whew, that was close. However, Ramsay spotted something that made him incredibly mad. You won't believe what he saw.
It's still moving, it's that raw.
Since they already ran out of time, there was no chance of refiring them, so the red team lost a point. Chef Ramsay sent them off with a final instruction and said this.
Take that back, then wake up.
Back in the blue team, Beth and Natasha were having problems preparing the buns. And in the process, they literally charred the hell out of a bun. Chef Ramsay picked it up with a sense of disbelief and said,
You're out of control.
Sorry, Chef.
You're way out of control.
While the kitchen was falling apart, in the dining room, the customers were casting their votes. Joe was tasked with walking around to get the customers' feedback when one of them called him out. One of the patrons said that she was happy with the blue team's burgers, but not so much with the red ones. When Joe tried to find out why, this is what he found.
I think it's undercooked.
It's raw.
Joe walked up with a burger to Chef Ramsay, who couldn't believe how such an undone burger even left the kitchen. He called the team out and gave them their last warning.
Got to stop, rethink, and get a grip.
Imagine coming across a raw burger at Chef Ramsay's restaurant. Now that's just embarrassing. As the challenge continued, Ramsay announced the arrival of VIPs, and take a wild guess who they were.
Welcome. Hey, sir.
It's all the other contestants.
Yep, they were none other than the other remaining contestants. To get some fair votes, Chef Ramsay asked both teams to take their aprons off. There would be no bias now, since the votes would only be based on the taste of things. In order to redeem themselves, Luca made a plan to send out burgers as soon as Ramsay called for them. By doing this, the blue team would struggle to catch up and miss the opportunity to get a vote. But would his plan be successful? The pressure at this point was intense.
Next 4, how long?
Now! Up now, Chef!
Just as planned, the red team started sending out burgers at a rapid pace, and the blue team struggled to keep up. With the red team firing out orders, the blue team started to crumble, like literally crumble. And Chef Ramsay couldn't believe his eyes.
How can you stand in front of a grill and burn buns?
The buns were almost charred once again, and Chef Ramsay had to say the obvious.
Even if you're blind, you smell their burn. Man!
Luca's plan actually worked, and the blue team failed to serve their last 4 burgers. And if there was one reason why they were leaving, then it had to be the burnt buns. However, Luca rushed to send out the orders. But in his team's haste, were the burgers still good? Now, let me remind you, the judging was completely based on the taste of the burgers and how perfectly they were cooked. The losing team would have to face a head-to-head challenge. And not surprisingly, with the standards that I just told you, with 4 burgers short from the blue team, this was the ultimate result.
It was close, but the blue team won.
Well, it was all about taste, guys, and the blue team nailed it. But this next contestant was so arrogant that he actually dished Chef Ramsay to his face. However, you have to see how Chef Ramsay reacted. I know Mark is gonna remember this for the rest of his life. It was the first day for the top 20 in Season 8 of MasterChef. The first challenge of the day was a mystery box challenge. The box had a paper grocery bag that contained ingredients like broccoli, bananas, carrots, ground beef, chicken breast, rice, canned tomatoes, white cheddar cheese, and chocolate. The contestants had 1 hour to cook the judges a dish using the ingredients, with a huge advantage at stake. Once the challenge was over, Chef Ramsay announced that 3 home cooks stood out amongst the top 20. He then called Sam Rife Passeru, Heather Dombrowski, and Mark Togney to the front. Mark was on cloud 9, believing that he had won the advantage. However, Mark was completely stunned when Chef Ramsay dropped a bomb.
You 3 stood out for all the wrong reasons.
The three of them were sent into the wine room, and after that, the judges called the top 3 home cooks one by one. That being Yachicha Holston, Jennifer Williams, and Brian O'Brien. After the judging was over, Chef Ramsay announced Brian as the winner of the first challenge. And because he won the mystery box challenge, Brian was immune from the elimination test. Christina then chose to save Jennifer and Yachicha since they showed great skills. Ramsay then announced that everyone except Sam, Heather, and Mark would be saved since everyone made great dishes in the challenge. The bottom 3 cooks were called back and asked to lay their dishes in front of the judges. And this is what Chef Ramsay thought about them.
Each of these dishes are way off.
None of them had shown the level of skill and technique that the judges were looking for. This trio now had to prove their worth to the judges in the elimination test. After a disastrous failure, who do you think would impress the judges? For the elimination test challenge, they were handed new grocery bags containing the same ingredients used in the mystery box challenge. This time, they had 45 minutes to redo their dishes, either by making a new dish or using the feedback they got to make an improved version of the same dish. As the trio got started with the challenge, the judges hoped that they used their second chance wisely. Heather and Sam looked serious, but Mark on the other hand moved slowly. And this reflected in the level of seriousness he had for the competition.
If you aren't pushing yourself, I'm not interested in having you in this kitchen anymore.
With 30 minutes left, Sam was making meatloaf and decided to go with the same thing he'd made earlier. But instead of just correcting his mistakes, Sam made the same mistake again by not putting the meatloaf in the oven, which takes at least 30 minutes to cook. Chef Ramsay was discouraged since it was the meatloaf that put him in the bottom 3. He then gave Sam a tip: if he wanted to make it perfect this time, it should go in the oven. Meanwhile, Heather was making a new dish, grilled chicken kebabs with broccoli slaw. And Mark decided to redo the pancakes with chocolate chips and a side of baked eggs. When Christina went to his station to check on what he was doing, Mark explained the situation using a football analogy. And this is how Christina reacted.
Then why did you try the flea flicker? So I'm gonna go
with all these football analogies?
Mark could get eliminated, but it looks like he was still playing games. His lack of seriousness made the judges think that he didn't care about the competition. With 10 minutes left, Chef Ramsay walked over to Heather's station. Brining the chicken to impart flavors takes 24 hours, and Chef Ramsay was surprised to see Heather trying to do that in 45 minutes. And to keep her chicken from getting super dry and rough, Ramsay offered her a piece of advice and said this:
Brush the chimichurri onto the chicken as you're cooking it.
Heather took the advice and continued working on perfecting the dish. But just as Chef Ramsay was leaving the station, Mark said something disrespectful.
You know what you could do, Heather? Just do what I do and ignore them.
Oh no, he didn't just say that. And to Chef Ramsay too. I know this isn't gonna end well for him. Ramsay was so pissed that he first asked Mark if he thought the competition was a joke. But what he said next left everyone in shock.
Take it serious or take your apron off.
Seriously.
Take it serious or take your apron off.
Mark's comments had left everyone feeling stunned.
What is Mark doing? This is embarrassing.
If his attitude continued to be this awful, he wouldn't last very long on the show. As the time ran out, all 3 contestants were ready with their dishes. Sam was the first to have his dish judged, and the judges felt his dish was better than the previous one. However, the presentation was a mess. Heather was the second person to have her dish judged, and the judges thought it was nice and liked the presentation. Mark was the last one to go, and he presented a chocolate chip pancake with baked eggs, bacon, and cilantro. The eggs just looked ugly, and looking at them, Chef Ramsay asked Mark if he was happy with his work. Mark was just arrogant and said this:
In all aspects of it.
When Ramsay questioned Mark if this was the best breakfast he's ever cooked, he actually agreed that it was. The arrogance pissed Chef Ramsay off, but how was the dish? Take a look at this.
That is tough to look at.
Although the pancakes were cooked nicely, the judges decided to boot Mark from the competition. Because, well, with that kind of attitude, he would upset the entire spirit of the competition. And so, Mark was the first to leave MasterChef Season 8. But in this next challenge, Chef Ramsay lost it when he didn't have enough portions of meat left to feed all of his customers. Why? The home cooks had given it all away. In the 12th season of MasterChef Australia, the contestants from the previous seasons were back to win the title of MasterChef. It's just like Hell's Kitchen Season 17's All-Stars. On the second day, the contestants were given their first team service challenge. They were divided into 2 groups, and each team had to prepare a 3-course meal for 120 guests. The judges revealed 3 ingredients: black garlic, ginger, and potatoes. And each team had to feature one of the ingredients for each course. It was actually Chef Ramsay's team service challenge, so you can imagine how tough he was going to be during this service. The blue team had some whiz in their team, like Reynold Pornomo, Amelia Jackson, and Laura Sherritt. In the green team, Callum Han had to face Chef Ramsay's anger. Callum's lamb looked great, and you won't believe what it was compared to. A foot spa? Yikes. Callum promised to come around and not disappoint the famous chef. As the green team was busy sweating and stressing, Reynolds made the challenge look like a breeze. He was operating 7 pieces of equipment in a swirl of liquid nitrogen. With the service pressing on, Chef Ramsay went over to the blue team to check how much pork was left. And he was left frustrated with the team's disappointing reply.
Left, I'm trying to talk to you guys. No one's talking to you. That is it? Yes.
The blue team still had 9 tables to go, and this drove Chef Ramsay nuts. He gathered the blue team and told them that about 36 people were still waiting for their food. Plus, they didn't have enough pork to serve. They only had 8 portions left, and Chef Ramsay wasn't having it. Ramsay then ordered the blue team to bring up the wasted pork tray, but they didn't have enough. And this left the famous chef really frustrated. He then asked the team if they threw some away, and the team denied it, but they had to look for a solution. With no backup pork, the blue team was in a huge dilemma. And well, Chef Ramsay was appalled.
But you said 16 portion yield.
Yeah.
I said be smart, trim one off that.
Ben Milbourne said that the reason they didn't have a backup was because they had a plan. Chef Ramsay was already frustrated, so what actually happened? The problem was the portion sizes. They were giving away way too much. But this wasn't acceptable, so this is what Chef Ramsay had to say.
Can we come together as a team and come up with a solution to how we finish this, please?
Of course, they couldn't just go back to the table and say, hey, we gave away way too much, so could I take your plate back? Chef Ramsay wanted an immediate solution, or he'd enlist all the contestants into the elimination test round. And well, this is the idea they came up with.
That can be saved. Yeah. Down the middle. That's what we're gonna do. Trim.
Ben quickly got Reynolds to get the portion they needed for the rest. Thankfully, they quickly got to work and Reynolds did his magic, serving to the rest of the tables.
Let's finish it off. Come on, Blue, we need to lift this up a bit.
Finish strong, let's go.
So these are the times that Chef Ramsay got super angry on MasterChef. Do you remember any other times when Chef Ramsay lost it on MasterChef? Let me know in the comments section down below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, guys!